hurting your brother. I would never hurt him. I really do love your brother. I might be older, but that just means I have more experience and I know how to treat somebody. Not an endangered person. I don't abuse. I don't even spank my own kids.
24-year-old Sam Nordquist traveled over 1,000 miles for love, only to endure weeks of unspeakable torture before his body was discarded in a frozen field, wrapped in plastic bags. What should have been a romantic adventure ended in one of the most horrific crimes investigators had ever encountered, all unfolding behind the thin walls of room 22 at a roadside motel where no one heard a thing. This is the story that needs to be told, and I'm grateful you've joined me here on True Crime Lures. If you appreciate deep dives into cases that shake us to our core, cases that demand justice and remembrance, please consider subscribing. These stories matter, and your support helps ensure they reach those who need to hear them. Now, let's examine what happened to Sam Nordquist, a young man whose search for love led him into a nightmare beyond comprehension. Sam Nordquist was born in Red Wing, Minnesota, a picturesque town along the Mississippi River where everyone seemed to know everyone else. He was biracial, identified as a black transgender man, and those who knew him describe a person with an enormous heart. His mother, Linda Nordquist, would later tell reporters that Sam would give you the shirt off his back. He was kind, outgoing, and deeply devoted to his family. He had a special bond with his sister Kayla's young children, serving as a loving uncle who brought joy and laughter into their lives. Sam attended Red Wing High School before his family moved to Oakdale, Minnesota, where he transferred to Face-to-Face Academy, a school that recognized his empathetic nature and his openness about personal struggles. Even as a young person, Sam was willing to talk about difficult topics, to be vulnerable in ways that many adults find challenging. Darius Hussein, the executive director of Face-to-Face Academy, later wrote that Sam's great empathy often came at a cost, noting how Sam was open about his struggles and how they could interrupt his progress in accomplishing his goals. But Sam persevered. He found fulfillment working alongside his mother at a group home for people with disabilities in Little Canada, Minnesota. Linda would recall how Sam had a particular joy working with vulnerable adults, how he found meaning in caring for others. Sam loved to dance so much that he would take clients from the group home on outings to go dancing, sharing that joy with them. He loved animals, especially cats, and nature. He loved cooking. He had approximately 22 tattoos adorning his body, including an owl on his throat, dolphins, tributes to his grandparents, and praying hands. His mother remembered their morning ritual. They would sit outside together with cups of coffee, dreaming about the future, sometimes driving around looking at beautiful houses and imagining what life might bring. But beneath Sam's kindness and outgoing nature lay a profound loneliness. Friends would later describe Sam as someone who was almost desperate for love, someone seeking deeper connections and acceptance. In the summer of 2024, Sam found what he thought might be that connection. He met a woman online named Precious Arzuaga. She was 38 years old, 14 years Sam's senior, living on the edge of Canandaigua in New York's Finger Lakes region. According to friends, Arzuaga had reached out to Sam on TikTok, and what began as online messages quickly escalated into something consuming. They would talk for hours on the phone, day and night, 7 days a week. They would FaceTime and fall asleep together on video calls. They posted videos together online, lip-syncing to the same songs, projecting the image of a couple in love. Linda Nordquist watched her son fall hard for this woman she had never met. She later told NBC News that Sam seemed smitten, exhilarated by the romance and attention Arzuaga lavished upon him. But Linda also had concerns. Looking back, she would describe it as love bombing, the way Arzuaga flooded Sam with affection. Sam was vulnerable, Linda said. Despite being 24, he looked younger, perhaps 15, and he wanted desperately to find love and to be loved. His friend Jackson Seeger would echo this sentiment. No one could blame Sam for wanting that. Anyone would want that. Sam was excited for the trip and the adventure that awaited him. On September 28, 2024, Sam Nordquist boarded a plane in Minnesota with a round-trip ticket to Geneva, New York. He planned to stay for 2 weeks, to finally meet Precious Arzuaga in person and see if what they had online could translate to real life. He gave his mother a hug and a kiss on the cheek before getting out of the car at the airport. It would be the last time Linda Nordquist would see her son alive. When Sam arrived in the Finger Lakes region, he checked into Patty's Lodge in Hopewell with Arzuaga. Patty's Lodge was not a typical tourist motel. It was a destination of last resort, where rooms were rented for weeks at a time by people on the verge of homelessness or facing other emergencies. Some stays were paid for using vouchers from social services. It was a place where people lived full-time, with a line between temporary shelter and permanent residence blurred. The motel sat along routes 5 and 20, a stretch of road that saw plenty of traffic, but whose occupants remained largely invisible to passers-by. Room 22, where Sam would stay, was just another unit in a long row of identical doors. October came and went. Sam's return flight was scheduled, but he never boarded the plane. He called his mother and told her he wanted to stay indefinitely to work on his relationship with Arzuaga and to help support her children. Arzuaga had several children, both young and adult, though the exact number remained unclear. Linda Nordquist felt uneasy, but Sam insisted everything was fine. He was an adult, making his own choices, pursuing what he thought was love and purpose. But as the weeks turned into months, Sam's communication with his family became increasingly sporadic and uncharacteristic. The calls and texts that had once been frequent became rare. When Sam did communicate, something felt off to his family. He didn't seem like himself. Linda and Kayla grew worried that Arzuaga was controlling Sam's phone use and movements. In October, the family requested a wellness check from New York State Police. A trooper went to Patty's Lodge and spoke with Sam. According to State Police spokesperson Trooper Linnea Crane, Sam told the trooper he was fine and did not need any medical or law enforcement help. But Linda Nordquist believes law enforcement was misled, that they didn't do a thorough enough job looking for signs of distress. She believes that Arzuaga was right there during the wellness check, preventing Sam from speaking freely. The police told the family that Sam appeared fine, that everything was good. Linda wasn't convinced. What the Nordquist family didn't know, what no one outside Room 22 knew, was that Sam's situation had become dire. In December 2024, Sam reached out to Ontario County Social Services, speaking to them about needing an escape plan. An email from the agency noted that Sam failed to return to their offices after that conversation. By late December, by all accounts from what investigators would later piece together, Sam Nordquist was no longer a visitor at Patty's Lodge. He was a prisoner. The torture began in earnest on January 1st, 2025. New Year's Day marked the start of a month-long ordeal that would end with Sam's death on February 2nd, 2025. 7 people: Precious Arzuaga, her 21-year-old son Thomas Eves, Jennifer Quijano, Kyle Sage, Patrick Goodwin, Emily Motika, and Kimberly Sokia, all knew one another. Some were romantically involved. All 7, prosecutors would later allege, participated in subjecting Sam Nordquist to repeated acts of violence and torture. They all ended up in Room 22 at Patty's Lodge, and what they did there would later be described by law enforcement as beyond depraved, as one of the most horrific crimes they had ever investigated. The details that emerged from the investigation painted a picture of systematic, sustained brutality. According to the Ontario County District Attorney's Office and court documents, Sam was physically and sexually assaulted. He was denied proper nutrition and hydration. He was starved. The 7 defendants allegedly kicked him, beat him with sticks, dog toys, ropes, bottles, belts, canes, and wooden boards. They forced him to eat feces and drink urine and tobacco spit. They made him kneel facing a wall. They covered his face with towels, shirts, and fabric. They used duct tape. They poured bleach on him. They physically restrained him and forced him to obey their commands, treating him like a dog. They sexually assaulted him with foreign objects, including a table leg and broomsticks. Perhaps most chilling of all, prosecutors alleged that Arzuaga coerced 2 children, a 7-year-old boy and a 12-year-old girl, believed to be her own children, into participating in the torture. These children were forced to cause or attempt to cause physical injury to Sam. First Assistant District Attorney Kelly Wolford would later say at a press conference that having 2 children participate in the beating of another human being was deeply disturbing, one of the most troubling parts of the investigation. The children's lives, she said, were forever changed by what they saw and endured in that room. The indictment prosecutors filed was, according to Wolford, just a portion of what Sam endured. It was just what they knew at that point. The full scope of the horror remained difficult to comprehend. During this entire month, law enforcement was called to Patty's Lodge at least 8 times, according to records obtained by NBC News from the Ontario County Sheriff's Office. But none of those calls specifically referenced Room 22. No one reported hearing anything suspicious. No witnesses came forward while Sam was still alive. The torture was happening behind closed doors in what was technically someone's home, and in a place like Patty's Lodge, where people minded their own business and survival often meant looking the other way. Sam's screams either went unheard or were deliberately ignored. It remains one of the most haunting aspects of this case. How could such prolonged abuse occur in a public place, with neighbors just feet away through thin walls, with people walking past the door and no one noticed? No one said anything? The case triggered waves of soul-searching in Canandaigua, with neighbors and community members wondering how the crime went unnoticed for so long. Back in Minnesota, Linda and Kayla Nordquist grew increasingly frantic. They lost contact with Sam entirely after January 1st. Kayla even sent a message directly to Precious Arzuaga, telling her, respectfully, that she should watch a true crime show to understand how the family felt, that they just wanted to talk to Sam. There was no meaningful response. On February 9th, 2025, the Nordquist family filed a missing person report with the Canandaigua Police Department. On February 10th, they also reported Sam missing to their local police in Oakdale, Minnesota. New York State Police launched an investigation. They obtained a search warrant for room 22 at Patty's Lodge and executed it on February 13th. What they found inside was evidence of a deeply disturbing pattern of abuse. Bureau of Criminal Investigation Captain Kelly Swift, the commander overseeing the case for Troop E, told the media that based on evidence and witness statements, investigators determined that Sam endured prolonged physical and psychological abuse at the hands of multiple individuals. In her 20-year law enforcement career, Swift said this was one of the most horrific crimes she had ever investigated. But Sam Nordquist's body was not in room 22. His killers had moved him. On February 13th, 2025, the same day the search warrant was executed, human remains were discovered in a field off Payne Road in Yates County, about 15 to 20 miles from Patty's Lodge. The body was found wrapped in plastic bags, discarded in brush on secluded farm property. The remains were believed to be those of Sam Nordquist. First Assistant District Attorney Kelly Wolford would later describe the scene bluntly. Sam was dumped out on the side of the road in a farmer's field, wrapped in plastic bags, where they hoped no one would find him. The Monroe County Medical Examiner's Office conducted an autopsy. The official date of death was determined to be February 2nd, 2025. Sam Nordquist had died after more than a month of torture, and his killers had tried to hide what they had done. 5 suspects were arrested on February 9th, 2025, the same day Sam's family filed their missing person report. Precious Arzuaga, Jennifer Quijano, Kyle Sage, Patrick Goodwin, and Emily Motika. 2 additional suspects, Kimberly Sokia and Thomas Eves, were arrested on February 20th. All 7 were initially charged with second-degree murder with depraved indifference. But as the investigation progressed and more evidence came to light, the charges escalated. On March 5th, 2025, an Ontario County grand jury upgraded the charges. All 7 defendants were now charged with first-degree murder, the most serious charge under New York state law. To prove first-degree murder, prosecutors would need to demonstrate that all 7 defendants tortured Sam Nordquist intentionally, and that they did so because they enjoyed it. The charges also included 2 counts of first-degree kidnapping, second-degree conspiracy, and 2 counts of endangering the welfare of a child. For the defendants, Arzuaga, Quijano, Sage, and Goodwin, were additionally charged with first-degree aggravated sexual abuse, which under New York law requires proof that a foreign object was used. All defendants except Eves were charged with concealment of a human corpse. Arzuaga faced 2 additional counts of first-degree coercion for allegedly compelling the 2 children to participate in the torture. If convicted of first-degree murder, each defendant could face life in prison without the possibility of parole. On March 11th, 2025, all 7 defendants appeared in Ontario County Court for arraignment. They each pleaded not guilty to all charges. Precious Arzuaga, wearing an orange jail jumpsuit, cried as a judge read her charges. Thomas Eves blew a kiss to someone as he was leaving the courtroom. The judge granted protection orders against all 7 defendants for the 2 children involved in the case. The defendants were held without bail, awaiting trial. As the legal proceedings moved forward, questions about the backgrounds of defendants emerged. Public records revealed disturbing histories for several of them. Patrick Goodwin, 30 years old at the time of his arrest, was a registered level 3 sex offender, the highest classification in New York. He had been convicted of child sexual abuse in 2015 and released from prison in 2023. He had been living in room 16 at Patty's Lodge, just doors away from room 22, since November 2024. Kyle Sage, 33, had been convicted of fourth-degree grand larceny and first-degree distribution of pornography to a minor. He was sentenced to 2 to 4 years in prison in 2022 and released in May 2024. Both Goodwin and Sage were on parole from previous sexually related crimes at the time of Sam's murder. Precious Arzuaga also had a criminal history. In 2016, she was charged with animal cruelty for starving her pit bull named Princess, which was removed by authorities. She had previous convictions for misdemeanor trespass and larceny. In 2024, she was accused of lying to the Department of Social Services by filing a false assistance application and was charged with a misdemeanor. Those who knew Arzuaga intimately told reporters they were not surprised by the allegations against her. Carlos Ortiz Rivera, the father of Arzuaga's 7-year-old son, one of the children allegedly forced to torture Sam, said he knew how she was. He told reporters he met Arzuaga 8 years earlier when County Social Services placed him in a hotel she frequented. He was a recovering drug addict, and he was so taken by her appearance and the affection she showed that he moved into a trailer with her. But he came to understand the darker side of Precious Arzuaga. While Arzuaga portrayed herself on social media as a playful, doting mother who exuded confidence and fortitude, people close to her said she was doing the opposite of projecting authenticity. Several sources told reporters that Arzuaga and some of the other defendants were part of a drug-dealing crew. According to sources close to the investigation, speaking to local news outlet The Freelance, after Halloween 2024, Nordquist and Arzuaga broke up. Arzuaga rekindled a romance with Jennifer Quijano, also known as Brooklyn, who was jealous of Sam. The source suggested they used Sam for his money and his Department of Social Services checks. By early December 2024, Sam had become Arzuaga's prisoner. One of the most painful aspects of this case for Sam's family was the belief that his death could have been prevented. Linda Nordquist said through tears that Sam may be alive today if law enforcement and social services had done their jobs. The family pointed to the multiple requests for wellness checks, to the email from Ontario County Social Services showing Sam reached out about needing an escape plan, to the patterns of concerning behavior that should have raised red flags. They pointed to law enforcement being called to Patty's Lodge 8 times during the period of Sam's captivity, though none of those calls referenced room 22 specifically. Could one of those calls have been an opportunity to save Sam? Could a more thorough wellness check in October have revealed the danger he was in? Kayla Nordquist expressed her frustration, recalling how she had specifically messaged Precious Arzuaga and said, "Respectfully, you should watch a true crime show and you would know how we feel, and we just want to talk to Sam." The warning signs were there. The family was sounding the alarm. But Sam remained trapped until it was too late. Authorities maintained that they followed proper procedures. Trooper Linnea Crane stated that during the October wellness check, Sam told the trooper he was fine and did not need help. Ontario County Assistant District Attorney Kelly Wolford explained that Patty's Lodge was not being investigated for any wrongdoing because it was essentially a housing location where people lived full-time, meaning what happened in their home was not necessarily something the motel was responsible for. There were no witnesses who reported the captivity or torture while Sam was alive. Wolford said, "The sheriff's office confirmed that the 8 calls to Patty's Lodge during Sam's captivity did not reference his room." From a legal standpoint, it's a complex question. When does a wellness check cross the threshold from respecting someone's autonomy to preventing a crime? When does a motel that functions as housing have a responsibility to monitor what happens behind closed doors? These questions would haunt the case. As news of Sam Nordquist's death spread, the case drew national attention and sparked intense reactions, particularly within LGBTQ communities. Sam was a black transgender man, and many advocates initially assumed his killing would be classified as a hate crime. The early speculation seemed logical. A vulnerable transgender person lured to another state and tortured to death. But as more details emerged about the defendants and their relationships, the picture became more complicated. Ontario County District Attorney Jim Ritz stated that there was no evidence the killing was a hate crime. He noted that the assailants were known to each other, that some identified as LGBTQ themselves, and that at least one of the defendants had lived with Sam in the time period leading up to the offense. Kelly Wolford, the assistant district attorney handling the case, pushed back strongly against calls for hate crime charges. At a press conference on March 5, 2025, she made an impassioned statement about why prosecutors chose to pursue first-degree murder instead. "This case is bigger than a hate crime," Wolford said. "A hate crime would make this charge about Sam's gender or about Sam's race, and it's so much bigger. Sam deserves to have the story told in its entirety. Sam was beaten, assaulted, sexually abused, starved, held captive. We cannot make sense of that. We cannot put that on his gender, and we cannot put that on his race. To limit us to a hate crime would be an injustice to Sam." Wolford's position was that the first-degree murder charge carried the heaviest possible penalty under New York law, life in prison without parole, and that was the appropriate response to the magnitude of what was done to Sam. Not everyone agreed with this reasoning. LGBTQ advocacy organizations across the country urged prosecutors not to rule out hate crime charges. Rochester LGBTQ together reported being angered and disgusted by the killing. The New Pride agenda stated they were devastated and enraged by the horrific murder of Sam Nordquist, calling it a tragic consequence of the rising culture of hate in our society. GLAAD, the largest LGBTQ advocacy organization in the country, issued a statement cautioning investigators from ruling out hate crime charges prematurely, noting that anti-LGBTQ hate can be perpetrated by anyone, regardless of their relationship to the victim or their own gender identity or sexual orientation. The New York City Anti-Violence Project released a statement emphasizing that regardless of whether law enforcement pursued the case as a hate crime, anti-trans violence often intersects with racism, hate violence, and intimate partner violence. The debate highlighted a difficult truth. Violence against transgender people exists on a spectrum. Sometimes it is explicitly motivated by transphobia. Sometimes it intersects with intimate partner violence, with exploitation, with other forms of abuse. Sam's identity as a black transgender man made him vulnerable in multiple, intersecting ways. Whether the specific motivation was hatred of his gender identity, his race, or something else entirely, the result was the same. Sam was tortured and killed, and his humanity was stripped away in the most brutal fashion imaginable. In the days and weeks following the discovery of Sam's death, vigils were held across the country. More than 100 community members gathered at St. Paul's Lutheran Church in Red Wing, Minnesota on February 17, 2025. Pink, blue, and white balloons, the colors of the transgender flag, swayed at the back of the sanctuary as friends, families, teachers, and supporters filled the room. The vigil was organized by Red Wing High School teachers who wanted to provide a space for community to grieve and honor Sam's memory. Lisa Hansen, one of the organizers, told the crowd that the crazy thing about death is that it's a strange combination of grief and reunion as people come together. She emphasized the importance of continuing to say Sam's name and share his stories in the months ahead. Paul Mickelson, a youth ministry leader who had known Sam since he was 12 years old, spoke about Sam's capacity for love and empathy. Sam had been open about difficult topics and personal struggles, even as a young person, Mickelson recalled. He remembered how every time they saw Sam, he would give them a big hug. Another vigil was held the same day at Wood Library in Canandaigua, New York, near where Sam had spent his final months. A vigil was also held at the Minnesota State Capitol in St. Paul, organized by the POSI Caucus and Queer Caucus of the Minnesota House of Representatives. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz posted on Blue Sky that the events around Sam's killing were deeply disturbing, writing that Minnesota stands with our LGBTQ neighbors against this unthinkable crime. New York Governor Kathy Hochul issued a statement offering her office's support to secure justice and providing assistance to Sam's family. On social media, tributes poured in from across the country. Artists created hand-drawn images of Sam. People shared loving messages and eulogies. The hashtag with Sam's name trended, with people refusing to let him be forgotten or reduced to just the gruesome details of his death. A GoFundMe campaign was established by Sam's family to help cover travel costs and to bring Sam's body home from New York. The campaign raised over $100,000, demonstrating the outpouring of support from Red Wing and beyond. Jessica Frechette, a childhood friend of Sam's from middle school, said at the Red Wing Vigil that she wanted to make sure Sam got the justice he deserved. Randy I. Waddell, a Red Wing Pride organizer, described the situation as absolutely tragic, something that takes your breath away and leaves an awful feeling in the pit of your stomach, especially if you can personally associate with any piece of his story. Face to Face Academy, where Sam attended school after his family moved to Oakdale, honored his memory through executive director Darius Hussein, who wrote that when we tell Sam Nordquist's story, we will have to include both the love and the hate. We can choose to embrace as examples of love. We must have the courage to fight all forms of hate. And because he would have done it for us, we shall always stand up for Sam. Sam Nordquist was laid to rest in Minnesota on March 4th, 2025. On September 28, 2025, exactly 1 year after Sam left Minnesota for New York, Linda Nordquist and Kayla visited Sam's final resting place and his favorite restaurant. Linda told reporters that there's not a day that goes by that they don't wish and pray that Sam was here with them. The more we start talking, she said, the more that tears start to roll. They expressed gratitude to those in the Rochester area who were praying for justice, thanking everyone from the bottom of their hearts for helping them get as far as they had. As of late 2025, the legal case against the 7 defendants continues. Huntley hearings, which review how law enforcement obtained information from defendants, began in September 2025 in Ontario County Court. Defense attorneys for Precious Arzuaga argued that statements she made during a police welfare check before her arrest should not be used in court. They also questioned statements captured on corrections officers' body-worn cameras, while Arzuaga appeared to be in a mental health crisis. Kimberly Sokia's defense challenged a line of questioning conducted while she was in custody but not under arrest. Similar hearings are expected for the other 5 defendants. No trial date has been set. Authorities have not yet announced whether the case will go to trial, whether the suspect will be tried together or separately, or if the trial will remain in Ontario County. The legal process will likely take years to fully resolve. The story of Sam Nordquist is ultimately a story about vulnerability and predation. It's about a young person who wanted desperately to be loved, who believed he had found that love online, and who traveled across the country to pursue it. It's about how the internet can create the illusion of intimacy and connection while concealing danger. It's about how people who appear one way online can be something entirely different in person. It's about how systems meant to protect vulnerable people, wellness checks, social services, community vigilance, can fail when warning signs are dismissed or overlooked. It's about how prolonged torture can occur in plain sight, behind a motel room door, while life continues normally just feet away. And it's about a family's grief, a community's outrage, and a nation's reckoning with violence against transgender people. Sam was described by those who knew him as someone with a heart of gold who wouldn't hurt anybody. He worked caring for vulnerable adults and found joy in bringing happiness to others. He was a loving son, brother, and uncle. He loved to dance, to cook, to be surrounded by animals and nature. He was open about his struggles and his identity. He was seeking connection, seeking love, seeking a place where he belonged. What he found instead in room 22 at Patty's Lodge was a group of people who prosecutors alleged tortured him systematically for more than a month, simply because they enjoyed it. Kelly Wolford stood at that press conference in March 2025 and asked a question that many have asked in the months since. What human being could do what happened to Sam? We'll never make sense of this case, she said. And she's right. There is no sense to be made of it. There is no explanation that makes it comprehensible. There is only the fact of what happened, the evidence that remains, and the legal process that will determine accountability. For Linda and Kayla Nordquist, for Sam's nieces and nephew, for his friends and former classmates and co-workers, there's the grief of absence, the knowledge that someone they love suffered unimaginably, and the slim comfort of knowing that people across the country have said Sam's name, have honored his memory, have demanded justice. Darius Hussein wrote that Sam's story must include both the love and the hate. The love is clear in every memory shared, every vigil held, every tribute created. Sam was loved, even if he was seeking more of it when he traveled to New York. The hate, or whatever darkness drove 7 people to do what they did in room 22, remains more difficult to comprehend. As the case moves through the legal system, as trial dates are set and evidence is presented, more details will inevitably emerge. The full scope of what Sam endured will be laid bare in courtrooms and legal documents. But perhaps what matters most is not dwelling on every gruesome detail, but remembering who Sam was beyond his final weeks, a person who sought love, who gave freely to others, who danced and laughed and dreamed of a better future. On Saturday, November 8th, 2025, Sam Nordquist would have been 25 years old. He should be celebrating that milestone with his family, maybe with a new tattoo, maybe taking his nieces and nephew out for an adventure. Instead, his family visit the grave. His killers sit in jail awaiting trial, and his story serves as a stark reminder of the vulnerability of those seeking connection in an increasingly digital world, of the importance of listening when family members raise alarms, and of the ongoing violence faced by transgender people, particularly transgender people of color, in America today. If you've made it to the end of this difficult story, thank you for bearing witness to Sam's life and death. Please consider subscribing to True Crime Lures so we can continue telling these stories that demand to be told. Remember Sam Nordquist, say his name, and may justice be served for what was done to him in room 22 at Patty's Lodge. This case remains ongoing, and we will continue to follow it as it progresses through the courts. Rest in power, Sam. Your light will live on.